1943. World War II is still in full swing, and there's still wartime cartoons being pumped out. However, this year is thankfully going to be markedly less political. Though you still will see some wartime cartoons on here, because of course this is World War II. So who won it this year? The Yankee Doodle Mouse, a Tom and Jerry short produced by MGM under Fred Quimby, directed by Hanna-Barbera. This was the first of 7, count 'em, 7 Tom and Jerry shorts that would win, and was the closest that Tom and Jerry ever got to a stereotypical World War II era wartime cartoon. It's nothing but Tom being beaten by Jerry in the basement, while the mouse makes several allusions to wartime stuff, including a since-lost scene in which he uses a stamp. He uses Tom's tongue as a stamp liner to put in a stamp that says, "Enemy gets in a few good licks," referencing enemy gets in a few good kicks sent to some soldiers. The violence for violence sake in this cartoon, rather than the suggestion that, Tom might want to eat Jerry, is pretty much the main reason why people think all Tom and Jerry's are violence for violence sake. Never mind the handful in which it's clear that Tom wants to eat Jerry. Still, they are very entertaining cartoons nonetheless. This was also the first Tom and Jerry to fully ditch the harmonizing style of cutesy fluff. Now granted, they had already been moving away from it since 1.5 years ago, or so, but now that Hugh Carman and Rudolph Ising were replaced with Tex Avery, the cartoons were allowed to take inspiration from him rather than Harmon Ising, and as a result, they tended to be faster, more snappier with the timing, and they were also markedly more violent. In particular, Tom and Jerry would gradually be redesigned to be less Disney-esque. In second place, we have The 500 Hats of Bartholomew Cubbins. This is a puppet tune by George Pal, and it is the first of 2 puppet tunes to adapt stories from the man himself, Ted Geisel, or Dr. Seuss. Yes, it's pronounced Seuss. The reason why it's pronounced Seuss is because the reason why people pronounce it as Seuss is because, well, it looks like Seuss. And it didn't help that Dr. Seuss actually began pronouncing his name as Seuss. So that's just a neat little fun fact for you there, but this is actually a very interesting puppet tune. Bartholomew Cubbins lives in a kingdom, and one day, every time he tries to take off his hat, another one appears in his place, and this somehow causes a kingdom-wide crisis. Cubbins would appear in a sequel to his book called Bartholomew Cubbins vs. the Oobleck, which did not get a puppet tune adaptation, as George Pal had stopped puppet tunes by that point. Still, a very enjoyable puppet tune. Oh, and also, here's some early installment weirdness for you. This book is not written in the rhyming style Dr. Seuss is known for. It's just a straight prose book. Something very unusual for Mr. Seuss. He really didn't start rhyming all the time until the mid-50s. That doesn't make the book any less enjoyable, nor does it make the short any less enjoyable. In third place, we have our obligatory Disney short, Reason and Emotion, directed by Bill Roberts, who down the road would better be known I can't remember whether it's him or some other guy, but I think he created Chip and Dale. Chip and Dale. It's either him or Bill Justice. Regardless, this was a rare directorial efforts for Roberts, who usually just wrote stories and did animation. It's a parable of how we should keep our emotions in check while relying on reason that suddenly turns into a wartime propaganda cartoon about how Der Fuhrer himself got a emotion hijacking him. Yeah, one of the more unexpected, bizarre wartime cartoons. And you wouldn't even foreshadow that this. You wouldn't even have seen that this was a wartime cartoon because there was no foreshadowing to the anti-Germany stuff. But it's a pretty odd Disney cartoon nonetheless. But you want to know what's even odder? Education for Death. This one-shot cartoon, much more deliberately anti-German in nature, was also released this year, and it happens to be one of the darkest shorts ever created, as it quite literally shows us how someone living in the Germans' Third Reich regime grows up to be one of their soldiers, and it's not for the faint of heart. There's literally nothing funny about it except a comedic retelling of Sleeping Beauty that even then is framed in-universe as German propaganda that is portrayed as completely unflattering in the slightest. My Disney was dark whenever he decided to be dark. Oh, and you'll also notice how I put Silly Symphony here? The actual Silly Symphony line ended in 1939, but for clarity's sake, I will refer to every one shot by the Disney studio as a Silly Symphony unless otherwise noted. Moving on to fourth place. Greetings, Bait. A Merry Melody from Warner Brothers by Frisch Freleng with a story by Ted Pierce. Music by Carl Stalling. And I forgot to put the animator, it seems. That would either be, I think that's Manuel Perez. But this is a follow-up to an earlier Merry Melody Frisch Freleng did called The Wacky Worm, which stars a Jerry Colonna-esque worm getting into hijinks. Here, he's being made into bait, and he clearly doesn't want to be. And the end of the short features another Jerry Colonna caricature that's a fisherman using the Jerry Colonna worm as bait. Can you say baitception? In fifth place, The Dizzy Acrobat. A Woody Woodpecker cartoon by Walter Lantz, directed by Alex Lovey, animated by Emery Hawkins, with a story by Ben Hardaway and Milt Schaffer, featuring a score by Daryl Cocker. Yes, this is the first Woody Woodpecker cartoon on this list, and by this point he's just a Daffy Duck Bugs Bunny clone, and he looks particularly ghoulish compared to what went down the road. In this one, Woody Woodpecker goes to a circus and runs afoul of a cop in that area. One of the better ones during Alex Lovey's first tenure with the character. But it was one of his last shorts that he made for Lantz before he left. So, Ben Hardaway and Walter Lantz had to actually step in and complete this cartoon after Lovey left. But since Lovey directed the majority of it, he was solely credited, with Hardaway getting a story credit and Lantz, of course, getting producer credit. Lovey would spend the rest of his career in the 40s working for the waning Screen Gem studio in Columbia before he suddenly disappeared from the public eye. Then he suddenly reappeared in the public eye in 1955, once again as a director for Walter Lantz, where he would remain until 1959. By that point, Loewe would move to Hanna-Barbera, where, aside from a brief sojourn at Warner Brothers that was really ill-fated, he would stay until his death on Valentine's Day, 1992. He was notably ambidextrous, so he managed to get a lot of animation work done as an actual animator. As a director, he had his moments, but he wasn't a Tex Avery or a Bob Clampett. Most of his work was mid, unfortunately, especially as the decades rolled on. At least he did provide finalized designs for Hanna-Barbera characters, so there's that. Sixth and last place, is Imagination, a color rhapsody from Screen Gems Columbia. Well, would you look at that? I was just talking about Screen Gems Columbia, and, well, it's coincidence that they're in last place this year. It was animated by Basil Davich, better known for his work at Warner Brothers, directed by mainstay Bob Wickersham, featuring a score by Paul Worth, and produced by Dave Fleschier. Yes, folks, Max Fleschier's career might have been over, but Dave actually went a little further. Now that he didn't have Max to worry about, and now that he didn't have the chaos at Paramount to worry about, Dave Fleschier was hoping that he would have a long, smooth career at Columbia, where he succeeded the equally legendary Frank Tashlin as producer. Unfortunately, as it turned out, Dave Fleschier was a shadow of his former self. Because, in the words of one of the animators who worked there, John Hughley, he was almost alien-like in his approach to these films. Instead of the innovative directions that he put in his Paramount work, and all just the experiments and stuff, he mostly stuck to imitating Disney. The reason why it was so subdued was because he had many holdovers from Frank Taslin's tenure, and he managed to keep most of them. But when he produced a Disney imitative cartoon, it stuck out like a sore thumb. This cartoon, with a story by Don Roman, is an exception. It is one of those examples. A boy dreams that all his dolls are coming to life, and the story is that this evil roly-poly is stealing a doll's love. This cartoon was directed by Bob Wickersham, a former Disney animator who left during the strike. Wickersham is better known as a Columbia mainstay, and he and Howard Swift are perhaps the two most prolific directors for the studio during this era. Wickersham was largely put in charge of their Fox and Crow series, where he managed to keep things very, 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 very lively until his departure in 1946, in which the aforementioned Alex Loewe replaced him. Wickersham, after briefly working Warner Brothers under Robert McKimson's unit, proceeded to go create TV spots, a commercial animation business that is perhaps better known for its tenure under Gerald Ray. After that, he just slinked from the public eye, doing the odd comic work until his death in 1962. some more facts about, and just an unrelated note, the music score was by Paul Worth. Worth would eventually succeed Dave Fleschier as producer after just 2 years of Fleschier producing. But it didn't last long because Worth was accused of fraud, and he lost his job and was arrested. Yeah. And that was the actual end of Dave Fleschier's tenure. In 1944, early that year, he was fired. And he did some odd jobs. His most highest profile work following Columbia was creating the "Let's All Go to the Lobby" commercial that was oh so commonplace in movie theaters during the late 50s onward and has been parodied and referenced endlessly to hell and back. But unfortunately, he never really connected with Max again. Max and Dave died in 1977 and 1979, respectively, 2 years apart. But their legacy on animation is oh so crucial, even if they fell off the slope there. Two other things I gotta mention. One is that beginning last year, Looney Tunes began getting produced in color, and also they removed the rule that Porky Pig or whoever was the top star of the studio at the time had to star in each and every cartoon. Thus, it was the beginning of the two franchises becoming gradually indifferent to each other. And after this year, Warner Brothers will just outright stop producing black and white cartoons. So, beginning next year, Looney Tunes and Merry Melodies will truly become indistinguishable from one another, especially when Bugs Bunny begins appearing in Looney Tunes after being a Merry Melodies exclusive character up to that point. And yes, Bugs, the bland cat and mouse stole the show. Don't worry, Bugs, you'll get it soon. Oh, and also, the other thing that I really want to point out is Disney's films during this time. I forgot to mention 1942 that in the video for 1942 ceremony, that Disney released Bambi that year, and it was their biggest success besides Snow White. All the films considered released between Snow White and Bambi, including Snow White and Bambi themselves, are considered to be the peak of the Disney animated canon. Unfortunately, the studio was kind of struggling financially. Yes, believe it or not, they were. So it was decided that until the end of the 40s, the studio's output would be package films. How that would fare out and what they are, I'll expand on to later. But since I've been yapping my mouth too much, that's pretty much all I have to say about the ceremony. So this is the Man from Wackyland signing off, notifying you that was 1943.